I love rugs. If you know me, or if you've seen me around town, you've probably seen me with the rug in my arms or thrown over my shoulders. My obsession with rugs began 10 years ago when I moved to Yerevan from Los Angeles. Suddenly here, I was seeing rugs everywhere, in homes, in neighborhood courtyards, in antique shops, in museums, in cafes and restaurants, and at the Vernissage handicraft market. At Vernissage specifically, I would lose myself digging through the trunks of vendors' cars filled with rugs of every shape, color, and texture. I remember falling in love with a gorgeous flat-woven rug, also known as a carpet or a kilim. In its center was a beautiful tree of life that was surrounded by birds. The vendor noticed the sparkle in my eye and told me everything that my newly arrived 23-year-old Armenian diasporan self wanted to hear. It's over 100 years old. It came from Western Armenia. It survived the Armenian genocide, and it can be yours for less than $200. Sold. I bought it right then and there and proudly took it home. Fast forward a couple weeks, however, and I found the exact same rug online. Same composition, same ornaments, same colors. And it was attributed to a modern production center in Western Turkey. I was devastated, to say the least. But what disturbed me most wasn't that I had been lied to. It was something much more difficult to put to words. Sitting there, staring at my laptop, I realized that I couldn't tell the difference between an Armenian rug and a non-Armenian rug. I couldn't tell what was real, what was authentic, and what wasn't. And I don't think that I'm alone in this feeling today. Our world is flooded with information, images, and products. Everything is instant. Everything is optimized. Everything is replaceable. But among all of this noise, I think that many of us are searching for things that are authentic, that are human, things that are made slowly, with care, things that are made honestly. I didn't realize it at the time, but that's what I was looking for when searching for Armenian rugs. Several years later, my mom was visiting Armenia, and she wanted to purchase a handmade rug. Instead of going back to Vernissage, we traveled 4 hours south to a village rug-making workshop I had heard about. When we finally arrived, however, we were very surprised to learn that they had no rugs to show us. They had no inventory, no catalog, not even photos of their previous work in their phones. There we were, ready to place an order, but the sale was lost due to a gap in their operations. Standing there, I was struck by two questions. If Armenia has a rug-making heritage that stretches back over 4,000 years, why did it feel like that heritage was so fragile, so at risk of disappearing? And if rug-making disappears, what disappears with it? Those questions set me on a 10-year journey of transformation, one that took me from being an admirer of rugs to today a producer of rugs, working alongside village artisans in villages all across the country. And throughout this journey, I've learned something new about rugs that I never thought about or expected. I think rug making has survived for over 4,000 years, not simply because rugs are beautiful objects. I think rug making has survived for so long because of the values that they require from us, values that I'm concerned are disappearing from our lives. I believe that rugs have a lot to teach us about how to be and stay human in today's world. By show of hands, how many of you have rugs on your floors in your home? Okay, almost everybody, excellent. Now, keep your hands up if you have rugs hanging from walls in your home. Okay, not so many. That's okay, you're forgiven. That is where we typically see rugs in our everyday lives. Rugs play functional roles. They soften and warm our floors. They also provide insulation and even soundproof when hung from the walls. Rugs, of course, beautify our spaces as well. But historically, they played much more significant roles in Armenian life. Did you know that Armenian women in the city of Gonzag were recorded to have intentionally given birth on rugs? And just as rugs brought life into the world, so did they facilitate its transition out of the world. Up until the early 20th century, Armenian villagers were known to have wrapped the deceased in rugs before placing them in coffins and surrendering them back to the earth. When my family fled Beirut during the Lebanese Civil War in the 1980s, they arrived in the United States with nearly nothing except 2 handmade rugs. I grew up with those rugs. They were present throughout my entire childhood, but I never once thought to think or ask why. Why did they bring, of all things, rugs all the way from Lebanon to the United States? I think it's because rugs are not just objects of aesthetic beauty. Rugs are material memory. The wool required to make an Armenian rug comes from our local sheep. Those sheep live and graze high up in our mountain pastures. They eat Armenian grass, drink Armenian water, and bathe in the Armenian sun. And it is thanks to thousands and thousands of deliberate human actions and gestures that their wool is transformed into a living, organic piece of art. A rug contains land, labor, time, story, and community all within it. A rug is an organic piece of the earth. An Armenian rug is a literal piece of our country that we can roll up and take with us anywhere. But at some point, we stopped looking at rugs in this way. We walk over them today without thinking about what and who is woven into them. At the same time, rug making itself began to disappear. The rug makers that I meet today remember the time just one generation ago when nearly every home in towns and villages across Armenia had looms, when local people wove rugs for their own personal use, as well as to mark major life events: a marriage, a birth, a baptism, a death. Today, however, everywhere I go, everyone I speak to says the same thing. No one makes rugs anymore in Armenia. Rug making is an actively disappearing craft, and if something is not done immediately, it will cease to exist as a cultural practice in this country in our lifetimes. Young people in particular are not interested in taking up the craft because it's not seen as a viable way to create a sustainable living. And honestly, I understand them. Making a rug by hand is hard. It's slow. It's unpredictable. 1,001 things can go wrong when hand making a rug. Rug making demands patience in a world obsessed with speed. It demands collaboration in a world that rewards individualism. And it demands care in a world built more and more on convenience. Now, full disclosure, I don't know how to weave a rug by hand myself yet. But what I realized is that I can connect the very fragile ecosystem of individuals in this country keeping the craft alive and connect them with the rest of the world. That includes the shepherds, the wool shearers, the yarn spinners, the yarn dyers, the rug makers, of course, the rug washers, and the rug finishers. So, 2 years ago, I launched an online shop And we started with a small batch of 5 handmade rugs woven in that same village that I had visited with my mom. And magically, the orders started coming in. Now, at first, I thought I was simply becoming a rug seller, someone who was connecting local rug makers to international clients and accepting orders on their behalf. But that's not what I was becoming. I was becoming a rug producer, someone who needed to have a very hands-on approach to local production in order to do it authentically. I remember very distinctly getting a call from my dyeing partners telling me that there was no Armenian wool yarn available for them to dye. When I say dye, by the way, I mean D-Y-E, which is the process by which we add color to yarn, not D-I-E. The craft is dying, but it's not dead yet, not on our watch. So I get this phone call and I wonder, no Armenian wool? How can that be? No wool in a country with over 1 million sheep, according to the Ministry of Economy? It turns out that 90% of Armenia's wool, 1.4 million kilograms, are burned every single year because of a lack of demand. My partners offered to use foreign yarn to fulfill that rug order. It was cheaper and it would have made our work much easier and faster. And how would the client ever know that we used foreign yarn to make their Armenian rug? But I couldn't do it. I said no. An Armenian rug made with foreign wool is not Armenian, if you ask me. What makes a rug Armenian, beside being woven by Armenian hands, is that it is born out of this land, from our sheep, from our mountains. If our mission is to revive this craft, we have to revive the entire value chain. Otherwise, none of it matters. And so we waited. I communicated honestly with the client about what was happening and why. We searched for local yarn and we adapted. And it was by facing that challenge and many other challenges that we continue to face to this day that I understood something for the very first time in my life, something that I had always heard but had never really experienced. And it's that the hard path is the most rewarding and meaningful path. The hard path forces us to slow down, to collaborate with one another, to trust one another in order to take on those challenges when they arise. The final outcome of a handmade rug almost never is exactly as we originally imagine it to be, especially with all of the problems that exist in our local value chain. But that's exactly what makes it so freaking fun. It's not the perfection, although I'm confident that one day we will be able to achieve near perfection. It's the imperfect humanity of the process that makes it so interesting and worthwhile. And so it was through that realization that we also understood what kinds of rugs we wanted to weave. In Armenia today, it's very common for rug makers to reproduce traditional Armenian rug designs as they existed in the past. Now, preservation is deeply important, but I don't think that it's enough on its own. This led me to even more questions. How do we create a healthy environment, a healthy and competitive market for handmade Armenian rugs if all of the country's producers are weaving the exact same traditional designs? And if rugs are material memory, if they are reflections of their makers and the land from which they come, what do we have to say as Armenians living today with our rugs? What do we want to share about our lives, about our Armenia, through this medium with the world? Our ancestors wove extraordinary, fantastic rugs that were reflections of their lives, of their Armenia. I believe that it is our responsibility not only to preserve their works and their achievements, but to keep the conversation going through the craft. And I mean through the craft, not simply by printing rugs and rug ornaments on apparel or on accessories, not simply by painting our crosswalks in our cities to look like rugs. Those things have their place, but they are not enough. If we are to claim rug making as being a part of our cultural heritage and identity, if we are to authentically say that we are one of the world's oldest rug making people, then we have to make rugs today by hand, the hard way. By doing so, we maintain our connection to our collective past and weave that connection, that thread, into our collective future. One of the most, I think, meaningful rugs that we've produced with my local partners thus far was born exactly out of that idea of connecting our past with our future. That rug is this one right here. Let me tell you about it. At Noravank Monastery, in the southern Vayotsor province of Armenia, carved on the facade of the Church of Saint Garapet, today you can find an image of the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus seated together on a rug. That carving comes from the 13th century. I drew a thread connecting that carving to a little known legend that says that on that night, in the manger over 2,000 years ago, Mary of Nazareth gave birth to Jesus Christ on a rug, much like Armenian women once did in Gonzag. As a result of the holy birth, the rug was imbued with magical properties. When exposed to fire, it would not burn, and it eventually made its way to Armenia. Now, that story is just a legend. We will most likely never know whether such a rug existed and whether or not it was magical. But standing there one day at Noravank, looking up at this carving, I felt this deep desire, this need to take the rug from out of the stone and tell its story by turning it into a real rug. And so we got to work. Together with architect and researcher Nanar Kalantarian, we reconstructed the original design of the rug in that medieval carving on the church. Then I found the last rug maker in the village of Khachig, a community not far from the monastery on the border with Nakhichevan. The name of that last rug maker is Asya Harutyunyan. And I chose her home village of Khachig deliberately because I learned in my research that the stones of Noravank Monastery were quarried from her village over 800 years ago. In my mind, that rug could not be born anywhere else. We brought the craft and the story of the Virgin's rug back to her village. And this right here is the very first sample of the Virgin's rug that she wove last year. Thank you. This rug, just 1 year ago, existed only in stone and in my imagination. Today, it exists in wool and in physical form in our world because different people of different generations and different disciplines chose to come together to make it real. My talk today wasn't really about rugs. It's about people. Making a rug teaches us to build community, to be thoughtful, to be gentle with our words and our actions, to love our craft, to love the earth from which we get the materials to create and to do our craft, to love the people with whom we create and for whom we create. Rugs are the physical manifestations of these values. They are soft, yet durable, movable, yet grounded, silent, yet expressive, personal, yet universal. In many ways, rugs are just like us. They are layered, imperfect, fragile, resilient, and beautiful. We are living in extremely uncertain times. I think we all understand that very well. The world around us is changing rapidly. Violence and war surround us. Technology is changing what it means to be human. Many of us feel, just like I did, looking at my laptop holding a rug that I couldn't identify, that we can't tell what's real anymore in this world. But this isn't the first time that humanity has faced rapid change and upheaval. Somehow, rugs and rug making have come to us from 4,000 years in the past. Why? It's because they have something to teach us about our values, the values required, demanded from us in order to bring these beautiful creations into existence. Values like community, like collaboration, care, trust, slowness. The next time you see a rug, think about what was required to bring it into this world. Think about the shepherds, the shearers, the spinners, the dyers. Think about the weavers. Think about the thousands and thousands of deliberate human actions that were woven into it. Think about how all of those people embodied those values, chose to embody those values in order to create something beautiful from the earth. Producing rugs is my way of adding beauty to this world. Beautiful memories, experiences, stories, and emotions. Beauty that I hope will last for a very long time after I'm gone. My family fled Beirut with nothing but 2 rugs, and they didn't explain why. I spent years collecting rugs that I couldn't authenticate, falling in love with a craft that I still don't know how to do myself. I understand why now. And so I'd like to leave you with one final question. Not about rugs, about you. What is your rug? What do you want to leave behind during your time on this earth? In a world that is constantly pushing us to move faster, consume more, disconnect and mistrust one another, how can we all be more like a rug? Soft yet durable, movable yet grounded, silent yet expressive, personal yet universal. How can we all be more human? Thank you very much.